What does the first right of refusal mean when dealing with a real estate contract? This is a real estate frequently asked question from home sellers when they receive this special contingency in an offer on their home. I've taken the time to record this video because I see home sellers accept this contingency while not understanding the impact it will have on them attaining top dollar for their home. In fact, accepting this contingency often causes home sellers to sit on the market far longer than they would have had they handled the offer differently. I'm going to share a real-world example of how we handled a first right of refusal situation and the decision-making process used to put the home seller in the best situation possible. So pay close attention to this short video and you'll have a better understanding of the right to first refusal in real estate and how you should handle this contingency when you're selling your home. Hi, I'm Joe Manausa, author of The Business of Getting Business and the creator of Manausa.com, where I've helped tens of thousands of people buy and sell homes. I would like to help you too. If you already are a subscriber, thank you and welcome back. If you're not a subscriber, please consider becoming one now. We offer the most thorough and accurate housing market reports on YouTube, plus answers to your real estate frequently asked questions, and we also provide virtual tours of some of the most beautiful homes in Tallahassee. Simply hit subscribe to get started and the bell so that you're the most informed buyer or seller in your next real estate transaction. You have your home listed for sale and a buyer comes along and loves it, so they extend an offer to you to purchase your home. Unfortunately, they're not yet ready to buy it, so the real estate agents involved recommend you approve a first right of refusal addendum with a contract for sale and purchase on your property. While this seems as if you're making headway, accepting this proposal is very likely to cost you a lot of money. Wait, what? My agent said it was a smart thing to do. How can this possibly hurt me? Before we get to these important questions, let's first explain a right of first refusal and what it means in a real estate contract. A right of first refusal contingency in a real estate contract is a method of coming to an agreement between a buyer and a seller with a built-in problem that needs to be solved. The agreement serves to help a buyer tie up the property even though the buyer is not yet prepared or willing to close on the home. Simultaneously, it allows the seller to gain a commitment from a buyer. A right of first refusal contingency gives the seller the right to continue marketing a home for sale even after signing the contract with the buyer. The contract between them is a full-blown contract with a price, date, and terms all agreed upon, with a contingency that allows the buyer to not buy the home and the ability of the seller to sell it to somebody else. If the seller gets another offer, it triggers the first right of refusal contingency on the existing contract. The seller can require the first buyer to either remove all contingencies and move towards closing, or simply terminate the first contract and let the first buyer go away. So it basically makes the seller feel as if he has a bird in the hand while continuing to market the home. For buyers, they feel as if they have the property tied up while they work to resolve the issues stopping them from closing on the property, which is typically the sale of their existing home. Both sellers and buyers can be sold on how great this arrangement is, but the reality is not always as pleasant as either believes it will be. Let me share a story pertaining to a first right of refusal agreement that we just experienced. We were hired to market and sell a $500,000 home in Tallahassee. This home had the great bones of a $650,000 home, but it was a bit dated and it was located on a street where there were concerns about the volume of traffic. The home had some features not often found in Tallahassee, so even though it had been expensive to build, some of those features did not have much of any value to prospective buyers today. Fortunately for us, the sellers were knowledgeable and followed our advice. We initially hit the market just as COVID-19 was impacting Tallahassee. The home was priced just above $500,000 and it only received a few showings in the first few weeks. If you've seen my video on how to sell a home in the digital age, you'll know that this is not good. After another week or so, a buyer came and saw the home with a real estate agent. The agent was experienced and called to discuss whether or not the seller would be open to a first right of refusal contract on the home. I believed the price was acceptable, but the contingency was based on the need to sell the home that they currently owned before they could buy this home. So, what would you do in this situation? You have a home that should already be under contract, but instead only a few buyers even came to look at it. Nobody was making any noise, and certainly no offers. There's a pandemic sweeping into town, you have a unique home to sell, and you're uncertain about the future market conditions. Suddenly, you have a buyer seriously wanting your home, and they appear to be qualified to buy it after they first sell their home. Again, what would you do? I'll get back to what we did and why it was the best move for our seller in a minute. But I first want to explore why I believe that as a general rule, sellers should not accept a right of first refusal in a contract. Why? Because a right of first refusal makes you invisible. Remember, I'm a real estate broker providing this advice. This is not legal advice. This is tactical advice for selling your home. Just because something is legal and makes sense legally does not make it smart or practical when it comes time to get the best deal when selling or buying a home. The use of a first right of refusal addendum is almost always a bad decision for the home seller. Why? Because the buyer has the right to cancel the purchase. In other words, shop around for another home, but the seller has to make their home invisible to other prospective buyers. You see, the internet has changed the home selling game. The attorney who advises you to accept this language probably does not understand how this becomes a huge impediment to the selling of it to other prospective buyers. If you accept a first right of refusal contract on your home, you're effectively taking the home off the market and waiting for the buyer to close. Do you want to know why? It's because more than 95% of buyers use the internet to search for homes, and the best property search tools only show uncontracted homes for sale. But even if they do, buyers don't want to compete for a home with another buyer, especially one that already has the upper hand. So they first want to look at all the homes for sale that do not have existing contracts. Accepting a right of first refusal is effectively eliminating your home from the search for almost every other buyer. You should never market your home as under contract unless you're highly confident that your buyer is ready, willing, and able to buy your home. As soon as you are under contract, you become invisible. The first right of refusal removes your home from consideration for almost all future home buyers. But never say never. My advice does not mean that you should never use a first right of refusal agreement. For example, perhaps a buyer has a home to sell and it's already under contract with no contingencies and it's scheduled to close on a date certain. If your highly trained, trusted real estate agent communicates with the listing agent for that other home and validates the viability of the existing contract, then the use of a first right of refusal contract, in this case, could make sense, especially if the buyer is paying you top dollar for your home. There are other situations where this type of arrangement could make sense too, but you have to always recognize that it costs you exposure to other buyers. Make sure that you're rewarded for that cost in the agreement. Here are some questions to ask before you agree to this legal entanglement. By the way, there are only 5 first right of refusal listings out of the 1,230 active listings in the Tallahassee MLS as I record this video. When I encounter a first right of refusal listing in the MLS, I always wonder what type of advice they receive from their real estate agent prior to signing. What questions they ask before they agree to such a bad situation for a home seller. If you ever find yourself offered a contract with language granting the buyer a first right of refusal, you should, at a minimum, ask some probing questions such as, why do I want to do this? What are the chances this buyer will close? Remember, about a quarter of all MLS contracts fail to close right now, so adding this language diminishes those odds greatly. What additional benefit do I get versus selling to the next normal buyer? What can be done to reduce the invisibility of my listing once I sign this? Would you do this if you were me? And if so, why? You need to ask these questions to determine if the right of first refusal contingency works in your best interest. Is your agent recommending it because it's the absolute best solution for your needs? That's what you need to know before you agree to sign it. Now let's get back to our story about the $500,000 homeowner with a unique property. Remember, we were facing an unknown situation with a brand new pandemic, and the home had not been viewed by many buyers in the first few weeks. So what did we do? First, we let the seller know that we found a buyer interested in their home. We then went through the 5 questions I previously stated were important for you to ask your listing agent when faced with a first right of refusal offer. The second question and third questions were key here. What are the odds the buyer can close, and what additional benefit can the seller gain from signing the offer? Before we met with the seller to address the potential offer, we did a market analysis of the home owned by the buyer that was going to be the linchpin to this deal. If it was an easy to sell home, already under contract, that'd be one thing. If it was a hard to sell home, not yet under contract, that would be another thing entirely. Well, it turns out the home in question was already on the market, but in my opinion, at the time, it was listed at a price far higher than it would sell. That means if our seller accepted the offer, we would likely have to wait for months for the seller to lower their price from fantasyland to reality to get it sold. And then in doing so, would the buyer be able to afford our seller's house without the benefit of the trumped up equity they felt they would be gaining from their sale? Their home price was so far off that I did not even need to worry about the final question of the additional benefit for our seller. That benefit would be a full price contract, but we did not need a full price contract if it never made it to the closing table, right? For these reasons, my advice to the seller was for us to send a message to the other agent that we would not be open to a right of first refusal offer, and that's what we did. This allowed us to continue to market the home at full speed without having the under contract stigma chasing away prospective buyers. We were able to get the home sold for its full asking price with a buyer that did not require a first right of refusal contingency. And the final note on this story, that first buyer's home is still on the market today, nearly 4 months later. The seller has reduced the asking price several times, but it remains for sale with no buyer contract. Had we advised our seller, who moved several months ago, to accept this contingency, who knows where they'd be today. As in most cases, the first right of refusal contingency was not a smart solution for our home seller. Here are my final thoughts on the first right of refusal contingencies. Let's focus on the eventual negotiation. Negotiations and professional advice for the home seller can be tricky. You really don't want to get to this point in the home selling process and realize that you did not do your homework before you hired the real estate agent to sell your home. In the story that I shared, my experience makes me believe that most agents would have advised the seller to work towards a first right of refusal agreement because of the uniqueness of the home combined with the new COVID-19 pandemic. Back then, nobody knew what would happen to a home sales during the pandemic, and nobody ever knows exactly how a unique property will be received in any market conditions. This is why an experienced agent selling multiple homes each month will be worth their weight in gold. You want somebody who is actively negotiating numerous contracts each month. The contract negotiation stage of your home sale will unfortunately reveal how well prepared you are to profit from the sale of your home. Your real estate agent should be able to advise you based upon superior knowledge of current market conditions for a home like yours, compounded with an excellent education and base of experience negotiating contracts in your local market. As with all special scenario negotiations, the right of first refusal language should be used sparingly and with the full knowledge of the liability that it creates for you in the sale of your home. Ensure that the benefit you receive far outweighs the cost of which you lose, which in this case, significant exposure of your home to people who might want to buy it with no strings attached. If you're planning on selling a home in the near future, hire an agent you trust to help you negotiate the best deal possible. We have other tips that you'll find helpful when you next sell a home, and you can see them by clicking the box at the top left. If you'd like tips for buying a home, we've assembled a great list in the box below it. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that you know about our future videos.